Hello, my name's Millie. I'm the School Engagement Officer and Apprenticeship Recruiter here at Peter, and I'm here joined by my colleague Beth this morning.
Thanks for the introduction, Millie. As she kindly said, my name's Beth. I'm the Sales Operations Manager here at Peter. Throughout my career, I've been exposed to apprenticeship programmes, having started my career as an apprentice, gone on to work for an employer where I've recruited and mentored apprentices, and gone full circle to work here at Peter, where I have the pleasure of supporting apprentices into apprenticeship positions and working with our employers to recruit apprentices as well. So hopefully we'll be able to bring some valuable insights to our session today.
Thank you. So today we are going to go through what is an apprenticeship, how the apprenticeship kind of works. So apprenticeships today look very different to what they did especially when I was younger. It used to be just mainly for trades and for hair and beauty, for example, but how they have changed and how they have grown. They're not just a second best option. It's actually such a great opportunity and great option for a young person out there to get an apprenticeship. So it's a very mainstream and respected qualification, and many young people prefer hands-on experience and learning hands-on rather than a classroom, for example. So it's a good track for them to get into the career they wanted to. So we're just going to walk through the apprenticeships, how they work, what they are, and the opportunities for that young person.
So before we jump in and go into too much about apprenticeship programs, we're going to start off with a very basic definition. So the definition of an apprenticeship is a real job with real pay where the individual learns practical skills alongside classroom-based training. Typically, apprentices spend 80% of their time in the workplace and 20% of their time studying towards a recognised qualification. And depending on the level of the apprenticeship, that qualification could be equivalent to GCSEs, A-levels, or even a full university degree. Because yes, degree apprenticeships do exist and they are growing very quickly. So how are apprenticeships created? Apprenticeships are designed and developed by employers for employers. Apprenticeships are all made up of knowledge, skills and behaviours. So employers will identify when a new apprenticeship needs to exist and a group of employers will come together to create that. These employer groups are called trailblazers. And when they meet together, they will design and determine what knowledge, so what does that apprentice need to know to be successful in this job role? The skills, so what they need to be able to demonstrate to be successful and the practical skills that they need to have, and what behaviours do they need to be able to display to be a well-rounded individual within that industry. The knowledge, skills and behaviours are agreed by the Trailblazer Group. They're submitted to the Department for Education, who will review the proposed apprenticeship as standard, refine it, publish it for training providers like us to deliver. So the apprenticeship programs have been designed by employers. We're talking about the practical skills, that real knowledge, those behaviours that are applicable to all the employers that operate within kind of those key industries. So what we're going to do now is look at the key elements that make up an apprenticeship program.
So one of the elements is obviously they'll be learning on the job. So they'll be based with that company. So 80% of the time will be actually based with that company and learning with them, which is extremely important.
The next part is apprentices will get paid a salary. Now, when we go out to our schools and present in assemblies and classroom presentations and talk to individuals at careers fairs, this is the part that lights people's eyes up. I mean, I get paid to learn. That is fantastic. So all apprentices get paid a salary. The average apprenticeship salary across the UK that was recorded in the past year was £17,000, although some employers do pay significantly more than that. So there is a real good earning potential for individuals on apprenticeship programmes.
They also, once they finish their apprenticeship, they get a recognised qualification at the end of it. So it will be recognised if they, for example, they want to move to a different, company after it.
And when employers bring individuals into apprenticeship programs, typically the mindset is to bring somebody in who will progress through that organisation. So they spend a lot of time, employers spend a lot of time invested in their apprentices, bringing them up to speed, getting them to, do the job role in the right way and demonstrate the right experience. So the likelihood of having that career progression opportunity off the back end of the apprenticeship is massive. Employers are always looking to bring new people in and have that chance to progress them through the business.
And while they are learning, like Beth said previously, they get 20% off-the-job training. So that's roughly 6 hours per week on average off-the-job training. And that's where they come to our company, for example, that we would do the training for them. It won't always be just classroom-based learning. So for example, engineering, it will also be workshop-based learning. So it is still hands-on learning at the same time.
And another kind of monetary element that again is really, really important for individuals considering apprenticeship programs or potentially going to university. With an apprenticeship program, there are no tuition fees. So the apprenticeship scheme is funded by the government and by large levy paying organisations. So the individual undertaking the apprenticeship program won't be expected to pay for the training that they receive as part of the apprenticeship program.
And all apprenticeships are different. So the duration roughly is between 1 and 6 years. Like I said, depending on what you do, depending on how long it will be. So, for example, engineering might be a little bit longer than a business administrator role. So we always say on average it's 1 to 6 years for an apprenticeship. So here are the education levels for you. So level 2 is an intermediate apprenticeship. That is an equivalent to GCSEs. We always say equivalent because, for example, if you do a finance apprenticeship, you have to start at level 2 before you can progress. But then you can actually start your apprenticeship at level 3, which are quite a few of our apprenticeships start on. That can be equivalent to A levels. Once you've kind of finished those ones, you can obviously progress up to a level 4, a higher apprenticeship, which is exactly the same as a foundation degree through university. A lot of companies also and places are looking at degree apprenticeships. And that's when you get to up to, for example, a level 7. And like I said before, the qualifications are recognised. So there's no difference between the apprenticeship levels and the equivalents of a foundation degree, for example, or a master's degree. It's just how you've learnt it and where you've learnt it.
So now we're going to go on to a little bit of myth busting. So we're going to go through a couple of kind of the common questions that we come across. So first off, do apprenticeships only start in September?
No, actually they don't. Some do, but some apprenticeships always do start rolling. So for example, business and IT, they are rolling throughout the year. So there's no set start date. So for example, it's like applying for a job. You can apply for at any point when the apprenticeship's out there. And as soon as they find somebody that, they want to hire, for example, then it might start within that kind of next few weeks to a month. But then you do have other ones. For example, engineering and finance, there will be 2 intakes a year. So one might, the intake will be in September start. So, you'll look to apply for it earlier. And the next one might be around Easter time. So all apprenticeships are a little bit different. So it's always good to keep an eye out on what apprenticeships are out there.
And it will vary as well from training provider to training provider. So the examples that Millie's given are how we run our apprenticeships at Peter. But if you were to pursue an apprenticeship with a different training provider, their intakes might be structured slightly differently.
So are all apprenticeships easier to get into than university?
So apprenticeships are really competitive. When you're applying for an apprenticeship, you're applying for a real job. And I'm sure that anybody watching along with us today will have gone through that process of applying for a job, and it's never one applicant per one job. It's very rare that would happen. So there is interview processes involved, the submission of CVs. It might be that the individuals have to complete like a video profile or attend an assessment day, for example. So there are potentially quite a few steps between applying for an apprenticeship and actually getting that position. Whereas universities obviously have a large amount of intake per year. So it can be a little bit easier to get a university place than it is to get an apprenticeship. It's very competitive, but it's also so worthwhile as well. So next question, do apprentices get support like they would do at college?
This is a really good question because especially if they've just finished school, apprentices get a lot of support. That is through the training provider, for example, and also the company. So for the duration of the apprenticeship, they will get a mentor from the company who will be guided through from that mentor. They'll also get a learning development coach from us, for example. They will come out to the workplace roughly every 6 to 8 weeks, and they'll go through the knowledge, skills, and behaviours, for example, that Beth was going through previously. Make sure their application form, no, sorry. Make sure their information is all up to date and that they're happy with how the apprenticeship's running. So they will keep them all up to date. If they need any extra support, they are always on hand for them. So there's no reason for them to kind of worry about getting no support. So can you still go to university after doing an apprenticeship?
Absolutely. So up until recently, apprenticeships didn't accrue UCAS points, but that has now been changed. So if an individual completes an apprenticeship program, they are accruing those all important UCAS points that will go towards a university application. So once they've completed their apprenticeship program, if they decided that they wanted to have that university experience, that is absolutely still a possibility for them. Also, the alternative as well is pursuing a degree level apprenticeship if that's the level of education that they want. But taking this apprenticeship route doesn't close off that university route in the future. So what types of apprenticeships are available?
So we are really lucky at the moment. So at the moment, there's roughly 680 approved apprenticeships out there. This can also change. So it goes up and down all the time. So it's always good to keep an eye out on different apprenticeships. But there's some apprenticeships that you might not have heard of or might have not realised actually do an apprenticeship. So you can now be a lawyer through an apprenticeship, a doctor, a teacher, an air traffic controller, or even something like just a florist. They're all such good jobs to work in, and doing an apprenticeship will get you into that role.
Yeah, there's a really, really diverse selection of apprenticeships out there, and a really good resource to refer to is the Skills England website, which actually outlines all of the different apprenticeship standards.
So with once you finish your apprenticeship, we always talk about what can happen next after the apprenticeship. A lot of people, they've trained them up, they want to keep them on at the end of the apprenticeship, look into kind of more training and things like that. So it's not just a short-term goal, it's long-term. We always say roughly about 95% of our apprentices, once they finish the apprenticeship, they stay on with that company. They stay on with the employment. That's compared to 87% from university. But that 87% who are working might not actually be in the role they've trained at through university. That could be something that they're just working, in the local shop nearby, for example, or something completely different to what they've studied in. So once they finish the apprenticeship they've studied in, then they continue. Through university, it might be a little bit different.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about who Peter are. So we are a training provider. There are a huge number of training providers out there. As a training provider, we've been established for just over 55 years, so a really, really well-established organisation. Originally, when we were set up by employers in the Portsmouth area who were seeking to improve the level of engineering skills that they had within their organisation. They were struggling to find training solutions that helped support them in reaching their aspirations for the training within their organisation. So they took control of that situation and set up a training organisation where they could set and determine that standard of training. And that's where we come from. We were originally set up as Portsmouth Engineering Training Association, but over the years we've progressed. We've designed and developed a new curriculum in partnership with employers to provide the skills that are required by employers of the local area. We currently deliver a range of apprenticeship programs across key sectors that includes business and finance, engineering, management, IT and digital. We work really closely with employers to support them with the recruitment of apprentices into their organisation. If you work with other training providers, potentially, it might be that they say, yes, I can provide you with the training, but you need to go out and find an employer who's going to recruit you and support you through the employment element of the apprenticeship. Whereas at Peter, we work really closely with our employer network. We're able to support apprentices to help them, help connect them with employers, and recommend employers to kind of go out and speak to find apprenticeship training. When we work with our employer network, we spend a lot of time with employers making sure that it's the right place to place an apprentice. So we do a number of checks before we agree to work with an employer to make sure that it is a safe place, obviously in the first instance is for individuals to work, but also that the opportunity that they are proposing for the apprenticeship programme is a good match for the apprenticeship standard. So we will hold a face-to-face meeting with an employer to talk about what their responsibilities are, to make sure that they have identified somebody within the organisation that will be able to support the apprentice. So that really key mentor role that Millie mentioned, that person's been identified and that they've had appropriate training to support an apprentice. We spend some time out on, excuse me, out on customer sites completing a workplace assessment. So looking at the key elements to make sure that it is a safe place for an apprentice to be working. And then we undertake a job role analysis. So earlier in our presentation, we talked about those key knowledge, skills and behaviours that make up the apprenticeship programme. And we will work with an employer to map each of those knowledge, skills and behaviours across to the proposed job role. And the purpose of this being is making sure that the individual that is taken on as the apprentice has the ability to demonstrate each of those knowledge, skills and behaviours as they go through the apprenticeship programme, and ultimately preparing them to sit their endpoint assessment and get that recognised qualification. If we didn't go into that much detail and that much depth, it might be that the apprentice isn't able to pass their endpoint assessment because they haven't had that opportunity to develop each of those key areas. So it's really important at the front end that the work that we do with our employers sets up apprentices for success.
So if someone's really looking into applying for an apprenticeship, the best time to look for, especially ours, is to be a school leaver and above. So it used to be, for example, 16 over, but obviously there's babies of the groups over there, August born. So you have to be a school leaver and above.
When it comes to applying for certainly a intermediate apprenticeship or an advanced apprenticeship programme, typically employers are looking for individuals who have their maths and English GCSEs at grade 4 or above, or an equivalent qualification, for example, a functional skills qualification. This is really important for employers because it might be that the apprentice is going to be writing assignments. It might be that if they're going to go into an engineering role, that they will be undertaking complex maths as part of their job role and their operation. So this is the minimum requirement that typically we would look for our apprentices. Now, whilst that is the absolute minimum that we would look for, we would always suggest that that individuals applying for apprenticeships are striving to be the very best that they can be. So if it's a situation where your young person is about to sit their GCSEs shortly, always try and strive to achieve the best grades across all of the subjects. Don't just settle for maths and English because that's what the entry requirements are. Try and aim as high as possible.
And what they do in their spare time is extremely important. So we have a lot of people, a lot of schools do work experience, which is brilliant. They might not be able to get the experience in the workplace they want to do, but it will actually help them in the long term of where they want to be. But personal interests, this is really key because, for example, when we do IT, they might think, well, I'm really interested in IT because for example, I was really good at school. But we have a lot of candidates who actually build their own computers from scratch. They learn how to do it. They might YouTube how it's made. And also for engineering, you might not be able to get into the engineering workplace to get that experience. But people buy old bikes. They will do those old bikes up. YouTube also how to actually make it. You might be able to, fix your your parents' car, for example. All that shows to us that you're going to be a really willing person to be in that role. And that's why
about that proactivity, isn't it? It's all about kind of that work experience and developing that and that kind of personal interest that makes you stand out from other people.
Yeah, and that's why we always say the apprenticeship is a real job at the end of it. So you want to be that standout candidate with all that information.
So finally, before we conclude today's webinar, just want to direct you to some potential really good resources that might help yourself or your young people or any individuals considering an apprenticeship program. First off, the Peter Careers Portal is a great place to start, particularly if you're in the local area, because that's where we advertise all of the apprenticeship vacancies that we're working with our employers on. Another great resource is the Skills England website, which is a directory of all of the apprenticeships that are available in the UK. And finally, the Government Find an Apprenticeship website as well. As a training provider, it's a requirement that we advertise all of our vacancies on there, and so other training providers will also do the same. So it's a really great central resource if the type of apprenticeship that you're looking for falls outside of the scope of what we offer here at Peter.
So thank you so much for your time and listening to myself and Beth. I really hope that you've come away with a bit more information. But if you do have any more information, please get in contact with us. We're really happy to help yourself, or the young person through the application process, through any information about apprenticeships and kind of the pathway from there. So here is our information. If you would like to get into contact, then honestly, please do.
Thank you guys so much for watching today.
Thank you.